I think we will get started. So maybe another minute. I see the doors closing in the back. Okay, I'm just waiting for everyone to find their seat so no one rushes too much. But okay, you guys quiet down. So I guess that's a sign to start. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ronald. I'm the current chapter president for IIDA Northern California. I will be emceeing tonight. It's great to see everyone here. Thank you for coming. Welcome to Pioneers in Design. I hope this is the event you were planning to attend tonight. Yes, just checking. Excellent. Okay, great. So you're in the right place. We have always, as you know, a lot of things to get through. So I'll try to talk as fast and as slow as I can. So we have a program ahead of us tonight. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this annual wonderful event that we all have come to love over the many years that we have been doing this. This is our annual gathering of the brilliant minds in the world of design, all of you in this room tonight. So thank you for coming. We're here today to celebrate the spirit of creativity, innovation, and the pursuit of excellence in our profession. We'll be celebrating the work of Rael and San Fratello as our pioneers, and Rachel Stallworth of Stallworth Enterprises will receive our chapter's Distinguished Achievement Award. So that's to come. So this is our program for tonight. Pioneers in Design is an event that honors visionaries who demonstrate innovation and inspiration. Our honorees have led novel efforts or breakthroughs in practice or implementation and brought new understanding of the impact design can have on people, from the individual to the communities. Events like these are only possible thanks to the community of volunteers, patrons, sponsors, and each and every one of you. You inspire us to do better year over year. I would like to also kind of make a few remarks that are more coming from me as chapter president. As in my position, I really personally get to experience the power of connection, the thrill of innovation, and the pride of being part of an amazing community that shapes the future of design and the future of our industry. Today, I want to highlight the importance of being a member of our chapter. We did something a little bit different today. If you've noticed little stickers, we made sure that we wanted to recognize all of our chapter members. So I just want to highlight the importance of why it's important to be a member. So yes, a membership with IIDA will give you access to resources, expanded network, elevated professional profile, and opportunities. All of that is great. But the way I think about it is really, I think of membership's value in comparing it to getting the vote out. Exercise your right to be counted in your profession. With membership, you can do that. Being counted is important. High membership enrollment supercharges our advocacy efforts. The larger our membership base is in Northern California, the more attention our lawmakers will pay to us, and that's just as simple as that. So if tonight you're sitting here and you're not a member yet, we would be honored and absolutely thrilled to have you. And let's show up as a unified force for the future of commercial interior design. And please join if you haven't already. There's a sign-up desk on the way out. So please make sure to stop by. And if you have any kind of questions, feel free to ask anyone who is marked an IIDA member, why they're a member, and also anyone who has this name tag that indicates that they're on the board. Another shout out is to our philanthropy group. So your support of our chapter also, yes, Paul, and Ashley Greenwald. Your support of our chapter is enabling us to support phenomenal nonprofit organizations in our communities and through our city centers in all over Northern California. Last year, we donated $63,000 to our local partners. And I think we're looking pretty good for this year as well. We'll see at the end of the year. Our chapter's theme for this year is Design for the Future. We'll be supporting nonprofit organizations whose focus is on our youngest generation and who work to positively shape the minds of the people who will eventually be our educators, influencers, and leaders in our community. So thank you. Speaking of our community, I would like to thank our chapter's board. This is part of the small village that it takes to do the things that we do. This mix of distinguished individuals in our community who volunteer their time and efforts is a driving force behind everything we do as a chapter. I would like to take this opportunity to say a few special thanks to outgoing board members. Laura Taylor, our fearless advocacy trailblazer. Rashanda Udekwu, our EDI catalyst. CCB, our chapter's hero. Yeah, you can clap for them. Laura Grigsby, our advisor to the board, Emily Micah from Student Affairs, Patricia Hernandez, Jess Midden, and Noel Sullivan from City Centers. Thank you all for your service, and we really appreciate all that you've done for the chapter. Also, a very special thank you goes to Verda Alexander of O+A. Yes, thank you. Our immediate past president, who in her term has been laser focused on impact. She's a warrior for climate action, a visionary leader, and a mentor to me personally and many others in our community. Thank you, Verda, for all you've done. So, speaking of board members, and old and new, it is my pleasure to call to the stage and introduce to you our next incoming chapter president for the year 2023-2024, Katie Mercer of Woods Bagot, to say a few words. Welcome, Katie.
All right, thanks, Yana. Hey, everybody. So good to be here. So typically, we like to talk just a little bit about what it's like to come into this amazing chapter and what we want to do as presidents. And I sat and thought a little bit and also talked to the board earlier this year. And I think we can all agree that the year ahead of us is full of a lot of unknowns. And we as individuals, as businesses, as an organization, and really even as an industry, are kind of redefining ourselves every day. And for this chapter, we kind of really need to sit and ask ourselves if we know what we really want to be at this moment in time. And how must we act to get there together as a community, I think is a really important question. And in order to really let us be who we want to be at our very, very best. Right now, we have the opportunity to be our own pioneers in design. We have some here today that we're going to hear from, but really it sits with all of us. Those that take the initiative, those that create, who develop and set in motion new ways of doing and thinking about things, those that prepare the way for others to follow. This is what we want to explore for the next year for this chapter. We've been doing some pretty incredible things over the last few years, but we still have a lot of work to do, and we can really start right now. And I propose just a few provocations about what that might look like. Number one, we should keep doing exactly what we're doing and just take it further. There's not really a big need to introduce and add more initiatives. Our EDI focus is strong. We want it to continue to thrive. Our advocacy advancement is truly notable and making incredible progress. P.S., our lobbyist partners are here tonight in the audience. If you can, find them, say hello, give them a high five, maybe even a hug. We love them. They're amazing. Hi, you out there. And we're so happy they're on our team. Our climate activism, as Jana mentioned, Verda came in with a real impact initiative. This is putting a lens on the things that we can all agree really matter in designing our future, which is our chapter theme for this year. And again, our philanthropic contributions continue to be a shining light for our community, and this really won't stop. So we don't really need to add more, but we need to take it further, and we need to really double down on our current efforts with a lot of focus, and that's what we're gonna do. The second thing is, I really wanna make engagement embedded in who we are and what we do, and not really like as an extracurricular side note. And what I mean by that is really being curious and listening to one another. With intent, we need to think different in order to act different. So we need to engage with each other. We need to really lift one another up, give each other health checks, ask authentically how someone is doing, and then wait for a response by truly listening and supporting one another. This begins with our next generation of designers, because are we really asking the right questions? I think we have a responsibility to do that. And then it also extends to our most senior leaders, our partners, and industry members. And then lastly, I think we can begin today by just acknowledging you all in this community. Yay for you. You're here. You make a difference. You showed up. Claps. And then with that, really acknowledge your team. Acknowledge the design partners. That could be our engineer friends, our vendor friends, our manufacturing friends, everybody that exists in this community that makes great things, our contractors, our builders, and even our most fierce competitors. I think when we notify and we really acknowledge when people are pioneering in the direction that we all want to go, it lifts us all together. So, because we all want to get paid, we want to be rewarded, and we want to be acknowledged, and especially around the great work that we're capable of doing. So we should celebrate our individual and collective partnership, pioneership on what the future of our industry could be, not what it has been. And this, in turn, is about taking care of one another here in this room and beyond, really in order to take care of humanity, which is our chapter's tagline. I'll start by acknowledging our current chapter president, Jana, who's bad A. And I'll also double down and thank Verda as well, our outgoing past president, for their incredible work. Thank you both from all of us, and again, the board. Next is our chapter patron. So this is time where I just give lots of things. So yeah, our chapter patrons. We'll start with our platinum chapter patron, Porcelanosa. Also, we have two in the house. Thank you, two. We couldn't do it without any of you. Our gold sponsor, Gensler. Hello. Our silver team of great folks. We won't list you all. Bronze category, thank you, those chapter patrons. Everything makes a difference. We appreciate you. We also have our nickel sponsors. And then our design sponsors. Thank you to everyone. The chapter patrons are really important for us to set our budgets and do all the great things that we do every year. Next, our event sponsors. So this is how we all got here today. Big shout out to Principal Builders, our 5-star sponsor. And then our 4-star and our 3-star, CRI, and others. Thank you to those sponsors too. Appreciate that. And to the Mohawk Group, who have sponsored tonight's specialty cocktail. You haven't tried it yet. This is after we're all done here. You get to go into the lobby, and they will be serving this at the reception. Thank you for that. And very last, our in-kind sponsor, Arbor, who has provided this beautiful furniture so that our wonderful guests have somewhere to sit that's stylish. Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to a great next year.
Thank you so much, Katie. Okay, so I have a few additional things to give. So we want to acknowledge the committee that has put this event together for us. First, special shout out to our committee co-leaders, co-chairs, Kim Klaas and Mindy Weichman. Thank you. And also the rest of the wonderful folks who have been meeting weekly, diligently, filling out Trello boards and cards and moving things around to the done column. And it was a wonderful process. And thank you for all of your hard work. And we get to enjoy it tonight. So thank you very much. Another administrative thing, you can get a CU credit for tonight's presentation. We have the class code here. You need to enter it inside the IDCEC app, and it will give you the credit for being here tonight. I'll keep it on for maybe another couple seconds. Yeah, everyone's got it? Who needs it? CU 118900. Okay, moving on. So now let's get started with the first portion of our programming. So first, we are going to talk about the IIDA Northern California Distinguished Achievement Award, which tonight goes to Rachel Stallworth. The award is given in recognition of significant and consistent contribution of skills, expertise, or service to the profession of interior design as a symbol of respectful appreciation for commitment to the highest levels of performance and engagement. To introduce Rachel, our recipient of this year's award, please welcome to the stage Lisa Weeks Gensler.
Good evening, everyone. As we all know, we are once again in the midst of a rapidly evolving industry in a constantly changing world. This year's recipient, Rachel Stallworth, is a true example of evolution and transformation throughout her entire career. An entrepreneur in every sense of the word, Rachel has immersed herself in the Bay Area design community since 1985. As we have evolved, so has she. She has pivoted with every industry shift to accommodate and understand designers, what we need, and how to connect that to manufacturers, reps, dealers, engineers, general contractors, and our clients for the last 38 years. Rachel. Impressive stuff. Rachel's also a passionate mentor. When I was a brand new junior designer at Clark Design Group and Rachel was starting her business, she took me under her wing. She explained to me the who's who and the what's what of the San Francisco design community. Extremely valuable information when you're starting out. She also was there for every question with the amazing amount of respect and kindness that she treats everyone she meets. I am honored to introduce to you tonight the Distinguished Achievement Award recipient, Rachel Stallworth.
I love this community. You guys know I do. And now I can't read my notes. First of all, thank you. Thank you so very much. I love this industry. I want to thank Northern California's chapter, Pioneers in Design Committee, and members. I am humbly honored to be here tonight. I really can't see my notes. As I mentioned, I love this industry. I have always had a passion and respect for the creativity and talent this industry and this chapter offers to the world. And to be a part of that is what I strive for. Without the support of my family and longtime friends, which is my group over here that I brought my whoop whoop crowd with me. I just want to take a minute and ask the many, many designers, the reps, and the manufacturer rep agencies to please stand if you mention my name to someone other than who you work for or where you go to. Please stand and show your support to these people that don't know me of what you've done for me here today. And I honor you. After 38 years, I've known people who were dated, got married, had kids. Kids went to college, got married. I got invited to the showers. I know a lot of people. I have a lot of history here. And I brought my son into it because I thought that he would enjoy it, and he did. He's a software engineer, but he's like, Mom, are all the women pretty in your industry? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. It's what moms do. Sorry. Okay, back to the speech. Over the past 30 years, I have not had to do any paper or digital advertisements because of you. Because you've talked to me, talked to people by word of mouth. And because of that, I have not survived, but I have thrived. Thank you. I will be eternally grateful forever. I am a Northern California native, born and raised in Stockton, California, with a family of 8, mom, dad, 2 sisters, and 3 brothers. My father was a general contractor, and my whole life, I watched my father design, draw, and build homes. After graduating from Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, yeah, Fort Collins, it's like Lodi. You guys know what I mean. Anyway. It was a bachelor's degree in environmental design. My minor was in industrial sciences. I was excited to make my start. I need a tissue. Oh, here. Thank you. I got it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Oh, by the way, don't I look cute? I know some of you don't know how well I clean up, but I do clean up well. Not your typical librarian, not at all, no. So anyway, after graduating, I came to the Bay Area. And as an in-house space planner, well, for those of you who don't know what a space planner is, that was when they first came out with cubicles, and we planned the space planners before those things went away. There's still some out there, but they don't call it space planners anymore. So I fell in love and found my passion learning the secret of this industry, knowing manufacturers, what they made, who represented them, how long it takes to get it, quick ships, in-stock programs, and more. Gave me insight to my plan. You see, my plan was after graduating from college, was getting a few years in the industry experience. My father and I would start our own design construction business, but unfortunately, I lost my father suddenly. it was, excuse me, and on top of that, I discovered I wasn't a very good designer. But although I lost him, I never lost my desire to become an entrepreneur and the passion that I had for building and design. Luckily, I was able to turn my passion for design into a career by using the experience I had as a space planner to help design firms organize their materials and more efficiently. You see, before the internet, there were a bunch of and hundreds of binders. Hundreds and hundreds of binders. You guys know what I'm talking about? Whew, okay. And numerous manufacturers across a wide spectrum of building materials categories, and industries. Whether it was healthcare, retail, commercial, I loved looking at what manufacturers had to offer, helping those designers with the talent I lacked, with the information they lacked. And so Stalworth Enterprises was born in 1985. I remember my first mentors. They were also my first clients. I got a call from a firm called Rasmussen Ingle Anderson. I went and saw their binders. I had never seen them before. I was like, uh-oh. I said, they asked me if I would maintain their library, and I said, I'm unfamiliar with your industry. I don't know it. I can't do it. So I got up and got ready to leave, and they said, no, don't go. We'll teach you. I said, what? He said, we'll teach you. So Lou, the architect, and Bill, the mechanical engineer, mentored me. They took me to another level, giving me the knowledge I needed to expand my business beyond the Bay Area to having clients in Los Angeles and beyond the state borders of Oregon, Washington, and even New York. They planted a seed, and I wanted to plant it in others. Lisa Weeks was my first. But there were countless others after her, not to mention a few manufacturer reps as well. Mentoring them and listening to them inspired me to design an online tool for them as the astounding capabilities of the internet had started to come to fruition. My tool started out as tradesources.net, and now it has evolved into Stalworth Digital Libraries. And now, over 30 years later, I can without a doubt say I am so grateful for the journey that I have shared with so many of you. During this new normal, I encourage you to reconnect to one another, to get back to your colleagues. They need you, and you need them. Throughout COVID, one of the things I kept saying, and one of the songs that kept coming to mind for me was Barbra Streisand's song, People. It said, people who need people are the luckiest people in the world. And I don't know an industry that has more luck in friends, in family, that we can go to Neocon and party, and y'all know what I'm talking about. And just enjoy one another's kindness and knowledge. And I just want to thank you so very, very much for this honor. Have a good evening.
Congratulations, Rachel. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next portion of our programming, the main portion of our programming. So we're ready to kick that off with the main program for tonight's event. So I would like to welcome. I need to remember to click. So excuse me. Here we go. Okay, so I would like to welcome to the stage Joseph Becker, an associate curator of architecture and design at SF MoMA, who will be moderating tonight's conversation. And also our pioneers in design for 2023, our honorees, Ronald, Rael, and Virginia San Fratello. So welcome to the stage.
Rachel, that was wonderful. Thank you. Congratulations. It's a real honor to be here with you all tonight and to celebrate these two fantastic practitioners and what is a 20-year practice and continuing to grow. Ronald Rael is a professor of architecture and the chair of the Department of Art Practice at UC Berkeley. And Virginia San Fratello is professor of design and the chair of the Department of Design and the chair of the Department of Art and Art History at San Jose State University. Together, their practice, Rael and San Fratello, is now in its 20th year and includes many different facets, including emerging objects, which is kind of an entity within itself, and For Us, which was an entity that you created and it's a kind of a term that you've created and then essentially sold. But we can talk a little bit more about that. You've authored books. Ronald has authored Earth Architecture as well as Border Wall as Architecture, and Virginia and Ronald have authored Printing Architecture together. They've won numerous awards, including tonight's, which is very exciting, and the 2020 Beasley Award for the Design of the Year around the work that you've done related to the US-Mexico border. Your work is in the collection of the Cooper Hewitt and MoMA, LACMA, the Design Museum London, and most importantly, SF MoMA. And currently on view also at the Cooper Hewitt, at the National Building Museum, at the Albuquerque Museum, at the International Ceramics Museum, and at SF MoMA as well. I had the great privilege of working with the two of them to bring into our architecture and design collection essentially 10 years of their work around the US-Mexico border and exhibit in a project titled Drawing the Line, Rael and San Fratello at the US-Mexico border, which was on view from August 2021 to June of 2022. And that was 10 years of their exploration around the border to date, and it's something that they've continued in their practice. So, congratulations on joining us tonight for your award for Pioneers in Design at IIDA.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you.
We're very honored for this award, so thank you, everyone.
We're going to do a little conversation and then have some Q&A, so get your thinking hats on, too, and then we'll be able to enjoy our cocktails outside. But I want to start, maybe we can spend a little bit more time on this question because I see it as really important to your practice. You have these two almost parallel, not opposing, but slightly different aspects of your practice. One is a side that's more focused on the conceptual or experiential or almost installation-based type of architecture, something that examines urgent social issues, conditions, and then another side that has a focus more on materiality and additive manufacturing, ideas that approach urgent architectonic concerns as opposed to focused on social concerns. How do these different approaches, how are they driven? How do you drive these approaches? And then how do they inform each other?
Well, I think Rael and San Fratello started as an architecture and interior design studio with the goal of wanting to build architecture and make interiors. And some of our first projects were actual buildings. We did an installation called Protomorpha in Valentine, Texas. We built a house out of Adobe there for a client, and we saw ourselves, I think, going on this path that was maybe more of a traditional practice. But there was a time, I think, where we started working on these more social projects, started looking at contemporary concerns, right, around what was happening in our political climate, what was happening at the border, for example, what was happening with materials in our waste stream. And we started making installations and maybe in some cases art projects around these issues and using architecture and interior design as a vehicle for exploring these important topics. So, for example, maybe some of you are familiar with the Soul Grotto project, which was built in the Berkeley Botanical Gardens, and it's made out of thousands of glass rods that Solyndra, the company that went bankrupt years ago, owing taxpayers millions of dollars, they were going to throw away their glass rods. And so that was a moment, I think, where something that had a political concern, a social concern, a material concern kind of came together, and we realized that these things aren't mutually exclusive. And then we started developing materials for additive manufacturing, I think along a similar lens, looking at companies that were making technologies that were perhaps inaccessible, right? Expensive, and thinking about how we could intervene in that system, maybe the same way that we had intervened with Solyndra, to start to think about how we could disrupt this system and develop these materials for additive manufacturing and think about building architecture and interior designs for the future using these materials. And that was a project initially, and that project became a company. And so there is this company called Emerging Objects, which looks at the development of materials for additive manufacturing and how we might apply those materials within this industry and our profession. And then there's Rael and San Fratello, which looks at these larger social and political issues, which you can see in our creative work at the border between the United States and Mexico. And for a long time, it did feel like those were two different threads, even though the technology and the material component may have grown out of Rael and San Fratello. But I think more recently, in the last few years, they've come back together, where we have started, for example, 3D printing with mud at the border between the United States and Mexico. So things are coming full circle. That original material that we were working with, those first two buildings, Prado Marfa and the house in Marfa, Texas, were made out of mud. We're bringing together the technology that we're using, robotics and 3D printing, and we're doing it at a place which is, I think, the border between the United States and Mexico, which is this frontier that needs the attention of our community and our public.
Yeah, that's great. I guess I'll only add that when we were founded, we were both living in New York City, and it was during 9/11. And I think that we really wondered what it meant to be a design practice after 9/11. For us, it literally shook our world. And so a lot of our rethinking of what it means to practice and design came after that tragic event. And to think, I was thinking about this in the context of interiors, and we became very interested in the interior of our country, what it meant to practice design within those boundaries, and what the consequences were of working within our country, and how it had effects on the rest of the planet. And those led to our interest in ecological concerns, political concerns. And so much of our work takes on that role. And so when we think about materials, we think about the ecology of those materials. I remember one of the first projects we ever did, which was in Marfa, Texas, was a house made out of mud. It was probably the first adobe house built in Marfa in about 80 years. And so all of the materials are hyper-local. They come from right there. We did one little porch, which was about half the size of this stage. And the clients wanted a particular kind of stone. So we spec'd that stone, not knowing where that stone came from. That stone came from a mountainside in India. It was quarried in India, traveled down to the port, got on a ship, came through the Panama Canal to the port of Houston, where it was determined that it hadn't been properly, I think, fumigated before it arrived into the port. So it had to return on the ship all the way back to India to be verified and fumigated somehow, and return to the port of Houston, put on a truck and delivered to Marfa, Texas, to make a small little deck outside of that house. So there was this hyper-local concern for this building and this one little footprint. The carbon footprint of that deck was probably like 1,000 times greater than the house itself. And for us, that was like, things have to change, the way we work and the way we think about the ecology of materials. So the ideas around 3D printing and additive manufacturing, the materials we invented, are very much tied to the way we think about political, ecological, social issues in design.
So it's both a confronting of an experience that you've had, but it's also, I think it's deeply rooted in your family history, which traces back multiple generations to what is now Colorado. But there is Adobe structure on that site. This is a building technology that has been around for so long, and yet there are political implications about the use of it. And I think part of your practice is to challenge that. So I wonder, through the materiality itself, there's a conversation about architecture as activism that I see as hugely important right now to how we move into the next phase of the world. I don't know, wherever we are, whatever the future is, it seems like there is a responsibility for architecture and interior design and all of the design fields to approach this with real precision, with real determination. And that's something that I really see with your work. Even maybe precision is kind of a funny term because there's a lot of looseness in it too. Maybe tell us a little bit about the technology aspect of this.
Well, one way we think about technology is to not maybe position it in a context of high technology and low technology. Like basically, there's a spectrum of technology that we can learn from, and what I mean by that is that some of our buildings, like the one you see there, is made with a robot that is printing with mud. So it's using one technology that humans have been building with for 10,000 years, another technology that humans have been building with for a very short amount of time. And we don't consider one as low tech and one as high tech. We actually think, where in the spectrum do those technologies find a home, and how and when are they appropriate? And that's really, I think, what we're interested in looking for, and not kind of categorizing. So the moment you begin to say something is low tech, then you assign it to a certain population, to a certain group. And for me, at least, that's extremely problematic to do. And it's been very devastating to many cultures around the world who work with traditional materials, and not recognizing that mud, for example, is maybe one of our most advanced technologies, because we as humans have been working on it for 30,000 years. We've been trying to figure out the best ways to do it. It's really climate responsive, it's really local, it solves all the problems, and a robot is kind of low tech in a way, because they break a lot, they don't work very well, they're just like these brand new things.
It just does what you tell it to do.
It does what it tells you. So that's kind of the position.
But some of the oldest standing structures are made of mud.
The oldest buildings in the world are made of mud.
You can't really say that about a lot of buildings that have been built and taken down in the past 20 years or so.
Right.
I also want to talk about how the idea of humanity is part of your practice, and that happens at multiple scales. Both, you're talking about larger cultural conditions, but you're also making spaces that are comfortable, that are engaging, that are attuned to our senses. How does that relationship of scales, not just of materials, but of experience?
Someone once asked us are you humanist or are you technologist? And we were like, well, we're humanist first and technologist second. And I think the technology always is in service to what the human needs are. So I think sometimes that comes into play when we're thinking about and talking about materials, for example. So going back to earth, this is a sustainable building material for the future. It's also a really warm, beautiful, rich material to live in, right? It has these wonderful haptic qualities, like when you touch it, and it keeps the interior of your building or your home warm in cold nights and cool in hot summer days. And so those are the reasons that we want to work with this material, because of how it benefits people. We've also developed other materials for additive manufacturing, like sawdust and salt from the San Francisco Bay Area. So, or Chardonnay grape skins from Sonoma. And so we're thinking about, well, how can we transform these materials so that they will improve our lives? How do we get them out of the waste stream, for example? That certainly benefits us if they're not piling up like sawdust or the grape skins, or thinking about, like with sawdust, for example, and the problem we have with wildfires. A lot of our wildfires spread so rapidly because of the small diameter wood growth, right? Which has to be masticated, and that masticated material can then be pulverized and used in 3D printing to make our interiors and our buildings of the future. And by doing that, and by thinking about that, we're actually protecting ourselves from wildfires. So we're trying to think about how technology and the use of materials can benefit us as humans and people. It's a kind of technological humanism in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not just about the materiality, though, but about the tactility. One of your most recent projects is making essentially a kind of hairy, furry type of 3D printing, which is not a type of tactility that we typically associate with this technology.
Yeah, actually that, I'll just dive into that a little bit. Most of you probably have had some experience over the last year with ChatGPT or text-to-image AI, and last summer when this technology really exploded, we were playing around with inputting text and generating images, and one of the things that we've always had an affinity for is texture and fur and hair, and we were making these kind of elaborate furry images, which take a really long time to model and render in the computer, as you probably all know. So that's probably 40 hours of modeling and rendering, and now Midjourney can make that same image in less than 60 seconds, which is incredible and mind-blowing. But at the same time, it's just an image, and you ask yourself, I think, how do I go from this image to something real that's built? And how do I do it through the technology that I'm most familiar with, which is 3D printing? And so we went on this journey of trying to figure out how to 3D print furry wood objects. And we figured it out. So you have these nice furry wood light fixtures that we're designing that you can install in your home, and it's like petting a cat, right? It feels good. You know how good you feel when you come home from work at the end of the day and your cat jumps in your lap and you get to pet it, or when someone pets you and those follicles on your arm are stimulated. There's that kind of happiness and warmth, and can architecture do that? Can technology do that? Can interior design do that?
I think that's really interesting, not just those feelings of warmth, but feelings in general, and how your work can bring out feelings and construct narratives. We just saw a few images of the House Divided exhibition, and the way that you chose to fill this divided domestic space with artifacts, and to kind of construct a story and bring us into this project is really interesting. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that project in particular, because these are, again, they're related, but they're kind of different, but they're kind of related.
Yeah. Well, there's two projects that were in that exhibition. One is called House United and House Divided. And in House United, when Biden became president on the very first day, he stopped all border wall construction. And the result of that, there were millions of tons of steel left abandoned alongside the US-Mexico border that was intended for the wall. And so we were able to smuggle 10,000 pounds of that steel to make this pavilion called House United, that we are now transporting to a migrant shelter in Nogales, Mexico, to create a space for gathering and coming together. And in the opposing gallery, a project called House Divided. And House Divided is based on a story that where the Army Corps of Engineers, when designing the border wall, drew a line of where it needed to go and drew a line through an old man's house. And we thought about this idea of what it meant to build a wall through someone's house and create that house divided. And this idea that we can be neighbors with someone and be so close and share so much in common, and at the same time be so far apart. And that project is about that. And we collaborated with this group from Juarez, Mexico called the Border Architecture Laboratory. BALA is their acronym. And it's a house, you saw it in the slide, that reimagines these two worlds, these two kind of houses that have very different design forces that shape them, political forces, cultural forces, economic forces, but come together in a very intimate way. And we even used that house to bring people together who had been separated for many years.
I love that, using the material of the wall to then become a material that has been made to divide people, to then bring them back together.
Yeah, it's a thing we called design jujitsu, where you use the force in opposition to create something else, right? And the teeter-totter is just that, right? It's the same material, it's steel, but instead of in the horizontal, it's in the vertical. Instead of dividing, it connects people.
So you both teach. Do you teach design jujitsu?
I'd like to think so. I mean, I taught a class for many years at Berkeley called Design is Activism, recognizing that designers do almost everything that an activist does. Designers try to solve problems, so do activists. Designers work with large constituencies. They work within certain legal frameworks. And so there's very similar issues that define a designer and define an activist. The only thing that's different between a designer and an activist is that an activist is willing to be arrested for their beliefs. And so, are we willing to be arrested for our beliefs as designers? Would we go that far?
I think a lot of my experience with my students at San Jose State University is that a lot of students come to this profession because of their altruistic tendencies and because of their desire to make change in the world. And I think that is kind of uniquely embedded in us as designers, that we want to make things better for people. And we're willing to work with each other to do it. We're willing to work long, hard hours to imagine things that do not exist otherwise. And one of my favorite things about being an educator and working with my students is trying to tap into that kind of inner desire that a student has and tease that out. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to change? What is it that you want to make? What is the impact that is so important to you? Don't let me tell you what to do, but you tell me what you want to do, and then I will help you figure out how to do it. And I feel like that's my role as an educator. And that's probably the way that, I give a desk critique. Some of my students are here. So what do you want this to be, and why is it important, and how can we make it real?
Over the years, have you seen a shift in that perspective? That idea of altruism has become more important versus other drivers of a decision to become a designer or an architect? Are we looking at a kind of a critical inflection point right now in the profession? And being an educator, you are in close contact with a new generation emerging that is giving you hope?
Yeah, I think increasingly so in the last few years. I mean, in the introductory comments today, those topics were raised, and they're things that we're talking about in the classroom, the kind of social issues and problems that the students, they live it. They're not looking at it from the outside saying, oh, I have to solve this problem for that person over there. They're in it. This is their life. And it's what they're living and experiencing every day. And so I think they have kind of a firsthand experience that they can share with the rest of us. So it's important to them. It always has been, and maybe now the rest of us are just more aware of it in a way.
Yeah. I feel like there is this kind of that story about this material from India, this stone, is this like allegory about this crisis of conscience in the design and architecture fields. And I feel like your practice is really approaching this. One topic that is, I think a big hurdle is the idea of building codes that limit our capacity to do certain things, especially around the use of materials like Adobe. And that's something that you've been pushing forward in a really interesting way. And that's kind of where the rubber hits the road for me, is how when we have big ideas, what are the hurdles that keep us from accomplishing things? And it's often, legislation or code or money.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of being innovators or being, trying to find new ideas and researching is that you bump up against the challenges of it entering the market or being normalized or being accepted. And that is certainly something that we're always asking questions. And it's a hurdle that we never actually know when we're going to cross it in some ways. I think, you had mentioned forest early on, and we had been experimenting with material invention for a long time. And one of the materials, which is sawdust, to take sawdust and be able to 3D print it, became a material that had some traction. There was enough waste of sawdust. We imagined taking the lumber industry, which is a subtractive industry, starting with forest, cutting down trees, making timber, and making massive amounts of waste, and thinking about how you can reverse that as an additive industry. And that went through many, many years of research and development to allow it to emerge as a company that created a really viable product. And I think that's also a big challenge, to think about how the innovations that one makes in design can enter into the marketplace. And that designers can also be entrepreneurs as well as activists, and that you can actually have a career by making the world a better place. That's the biggest goal here. That's I think one of the things that we're trying to do.
Yeah. In 2018, I think San Francisco, Berkeley, and Oakland all relaxed their building codes for building ADUs, and because of the housing crisis, right? We have a housing crisis in the Bay Area. There are not enough places for people to live, so that policy was relaxed. And we took advantage of that and built what you see here, the cabin of 3D printed curiosities in the backyard of a house in Oakland, because you could now build up to 1,200 square feet without design review. And so this was an opportunity for us to build with some of the materials that we had developed. So the front facade of this building has 3D printed Chardonnay tiles, sawdust tiles, and 3D printed cement tiles that hold succulents. And I think if this project had to go through a building review, they would not have known how to treat these materials, right? Like, oh, you want to put Chardonnay on the front of your building? Like, yes, I do. So because of that relaxing, we were able to do this, and now it's standing, and it's a proof of concept that these materials can exist and survive as a viable building material in this context. And so I think looking for those moments where maybe there are problems and identifying a place to insert your own work or your own research as a solution is one tactic that we've had. So now we could probably go to the building department and say, oh, this building's been here for 5 or 6 years now. Come and check it out, and maybe you can rethink this policy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe the same with the robotic printing of mud, right?
The project Skylos, which was on a little bit earlier, is the first permitted and engineered 3D printed earthen building in the world. And now it's set a precedent within the state of Colorado and the United States. And so like, well, we've laid the groundwork, no pun intended, for building buildings this way. And so it's much easier now to pass through the code. So there's another building, a home planned in this coming year using this technology. And it passes through the building department now with no problem because it set a precedent.
That's hugely exciting.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we're asking permission, and sometimes we're not.
It's the best
But
way
with the
forward.
ultimate goal of making it, I think, accessible and viable. Yeah.
So the trajectory of your practice has also kind of paralleled a great democratization of the technology. In a way, at the very beginning, it was difficult to come by, and I think now you can buy a 3D printer for $200 or something like that. So almost anybody can start to explore these things. Most design studios have their own, additive manufacturing for prototyping. How does that, how are you imagining the future, essentially, and what your role is, having been pioneers in this technology and continuing to push it, but seeing how it's taking over in that sense?
How do we imagine the future?
I think robots will just be normal. They'll be a normal part of the way we construct buildings in the future, right? 3D printers and robots, and I think that we'll work collaboratively with them. So we will work cobotically with them, and they will open up doors for us to be more creative in certain ways because they're going to do these repetitive tasks. And we will learn to not be afraid of them, that they're not going to take our jobs, they're just going to offer us different jobs. In fact, every time I work with a robot, there's like 10 people around one robot. So they might even create more jobs for us going forward. But I see a kind of hand-in-hand ally with these this technological equipment that we're right on the cusp of. It's not normal yet. I think at the university, we're training our students how to use these tools, and they leave and they'll go to your design firms, and they know how to use laser cutters, 3D printers. They're going to know how to use robot arms starting next year. You'll get that too. And it will become normal. It will become a part of your practice. Yeah. And then we'll bring the contractors on board, right? But we have to lower the bar. We have to make it a little bit easier for them, I think, to translate what we're doing in the design world to the world of construction. And so one of the ways in which we're trying to do that is by creating software that's easy to use. So you don't have to spend months learning how to 3D model and 3D print something, but we've developed a software called Potterware that just runs in the cloud. You can use it on your phone. And you can design things very quickly. It generates a G-code file very quickly. You can control the robot arm from your phone. Again, just trying to make things really easy for people to use in the future so that this can become more normalized, I think.
Could you imagine something like Potterware growing in scale to be able to, design your own environment, house?
Homeware, officeware, yeah, maybe.
Houseware, it's in
Houseware.
development right now, actually. But I think this question of how do we see the future, I think we see the future as maybe how we see our practice. It's one that attempts to connect people. It's one that attempts to learn and share stories about our built environment, the materials we use, the people who occupy them, and ways that involve social justice. I mean, for us, that's a big part of our practice. And so we might see just a project like that, which is a bunch of corn-based bioplastic coming together to make something maybe beautiful and interesting, but embedded in that are ideas about how we perceive patterns and the meaning of them. Some of those patterns look like an American quilt, and some of them look like the geometries from a mosque. And what are the relationships between those mathematically and as a material? And what does it mean to occupy those kind of spaces? And ultimately, it's a form of building construction. So each of those colors is a code that allows us to know where to put each of the building modules to assemble the building. So again, it's a way of coming together, it's a way of understanding, and a way of sharing.
Beautiful. I'm going to open it up to some questions so that we can get some
sharing.
other ideas and continue the sharing. Yeah. We've got a couple microphones, so if you raise your hand, somebody will come to you. We've got one right in front here. Yeah. Yeah. Well, sure.
Thank you for that. That was awesome. I would consider you both futurists and future thinkers, and you seem like problem solvers, like all designers. So what is the next problem you want to solve?
What is the next problem?
That's a really hard question.
I think it's a really hard question because designers, I wonder if as designers, we look for the problems or the problems come to us. And so I think the next problem we want to solve is the problem that comes to us. And then we'll tackle it. I don't know.
Yeah, things present themselves, you know, and then opportunities emerge from that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm really focused right now myself on continuing to understand how this robotically manufactured Earth could become very normalized, can become like everything that's been constructed so far is more approaching land art, or these are experiments of prototypes of what housing could be. And at what point is it not about the novelty of 3D printing, or even that it's mud, but anyone in this audience could look at that structure and say, I could live there. I want to live there. And so that's the problem on the horizon.
And I think I've been working a lot with other educators, trying to teach them some of the skills that I know. So it's not just going straight from me to my students, but it is going from me to other professors at other universities, to teachers at high schools, to teachers at middle schools. I'm doing workshops with young girls who want to 3D print fashion. So I'm teaching them how to 3D print wovens and fur and digital lace as a way of thinking about, like, what does a new future look like for them? And that's a profession that we don't know yet, right? What that's going to be, because that will be their normal. What is novel to us will be their normal. And so trying to extend, I guess, this research and to have a much larger kind of sphere of influence outside of here, I think is what I've been focusing on this year.
There's a question here.
Check. Okay. Hi. So as professors and working with now students across all ages and generations, but more so in your college, as your college professors, has there ever been a thesis or something that a student has given to you, or a problem that has sparked any of your studies to take further? Have you ever found inspiration within your students or projects?
Yeah, Joseph and I were actually talking about that earlier. One of my favorite things about being an educator is when a student presents something in a pinup or a desk critique, and you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. You know, I didn't ask you to do that. This is a total surprise. And I love those moments, right? And there are so many of them. I was actually doing the math today. I've been teaching at SJSU for 13 years, and I think I've had over 1,000 students. And so there are probably 500 of those moments, right? Where you're like, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. Actually, just last week, I was working with a student who was 3D printing with the corn-based bioplastic, and she had been printing something flat, and she added some curvature to it so you could start to see what might mimic the wood grain in the material. And then I thought she would stop, but she kept going. She sanded it, she finished it, and in the end, it looked just like wood, and I could not believe it. It was so impressive, and I walked away from that pinup thinking, I want to do that. I want to do that in my next project. And I love those moments.
Yeah, I started teaching at the university 23 years ago, and I never imagined that I would be a professor. That was just not something that was in my own becoming. And I remember the very first studio that I ever taught was, there was a moment in the state of Colorado when there were small rural towns were inviting private prisons to be constructed with the towns as a form of economic development. And everyone drew sides about that, either for or against. And so the very first studio I ever taught was at the University of Colorado, and I just simply asked the students what they thought of that. Not necessarily to take sides or to say it's good or bad, but just to think about what prisons are, what prisons mean, what it means to do that in rural environments, what it means relative to the economy, and to make design decisions related to that. We actually visited a maximum security prison in Colorado. And then the very first studio I taught at the University of California, Berkeley, was called Border Walls Architecture. And I asked students what to think about the border wall, to think about the largest construction project in the 21st century, which is constructed without architects or designers, all engineers, and not making any kind of, not attempting to take sides, but just to think about it and think about the responses. And I think a lot of our projects attempt to be neutral, even though they draw a line in the sand and make very particular conclusions, but to attempt to be objective as designers and attempt to think how to move forward with objectivity, but not to forget a moral compass. Yeah.
I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. Over here. Thank you for pointing.
Is this on? Okay. Kim Pipkin with Black Developers Forum. Thank you, Ron, for talking about justice. My question is, where and how can you show or demonstrate to us that you have helped to humanize real estate development? And for the people who don't know, this month is Affordable Housing Month, and I would encourage you to be mindful of what that means. There should not be a thing as Affordable Housing Month. So I'm asking both of you up there, basically, how have you helped to humanize real estate development, and where do you intersect with developers, policy wonks, people in the community level? Can you demonstrate to us that your work is actually doing some good for some people?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. So there's a project that we have collectively worked on for a very long time, and I've been taking the lead on it recently, that I'm calling the Adobe Archipelago. And in New Mexico and Colorado, Adobe used to be a building material for the masses, traditionally for thousands of years. And because of building regulations, it is no longer possible. So those who traditionally build with Adobe, and they're Native Americans, indigenous people, Latinos, do not any longer have access to that material. It's become a material for the very wealthy. And so the very wealthy in Santa Fe build Adobe buildings, and the very poor, who traditionally lived in these buildings for a very long time, live in trailers and manufactured homes. And so that flip has affected communities. And so the idea of the Adobe Archipelago is to reconnect people with that earthen tradition. And so part of that is through technology. And so part of the robotic 3D printing is to reintroduce the material as a building material in the 21st century, but not forgetting the practices of construction that have existed for thousands of years. So the Adobe Archipelago is one where the practice has become a developer in a way. And we are currently managing and have acquired about 13 Adobe houses in between New Mexico and Colorado. And the intention is to develop these, to bring not only the buildings back to life, but their stories, and also the building material technology through workshops. And so we have hosted workshops with some very talented people in the audience that teach these earthen construction methods, and so that the public can become their own developers again, to develop their own buildings and architecture by educating people how to build in this very fundamental way. And so I don't know where this project will go. It's both been happening for a long time, but also feels new because it's slow. Developing 13 historic buildings and acquiring them, renovating them, restoring them, teaching through them, telling the stories through them has been a really slow process, but a really beautiful process because many people have come together around what I call the healing of these buildings and the healing of communities that have been stripped from their traditional building culture. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Jen.
I think that's a really wonderful place to cap it off. So, Virginia, Ronald, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. This was wonderful. Just very minor closing remarks. So I would like to thank all of you who are here with us tonight. I would like to thank our speakers, our pioneers, and also Rachel as well. Congratulations. Please mark your calendars for upcoming events. The next big event we will have will be September 8th, Friday morning, early morning. It will be Leaders Breakfast at Four Seasons, as per usual. So mark your calendars, and I hope to see you all there. For now, please enjoy responsibly the reception. And thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and I hope to see you again.